Definitely, there should be more studies on the pine bark, and they need to investigate more about the pine bark. But based on our study, I would say pine bark is a kind of natural product, and at low level, it can be safe and like it can be potential parasite for the combating the potential product that can combating the parasites, and definitely it's cheap. And we need to definitely do more research about the pine bark and levels of the pine bark for the future, especially for keeping the birds for longer time until the slaughter time.
Welcome to the Poultry Nutrition Blackbelt Podcast, brought to you by Wisenetics. I'm Doug Korver, a co-host of the show and nutritionist at Alpine Poultry Nutrition, Inc. Thanks for joining us today as we discuss the latest in poultry nutrition research and industry trends. Our guest today is Hamid Naeini, who is a PhD candidate at the University of Georgia. Welcome to the Poultry Nutrition Blackbelt Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me here today.
Let's talk about your graduate work at the University of Georgia on blackhead disease. Can you tell us what that is?
Actually, Histomonas that I'm working since 2022 in Dr. U Kim's lab. It's a major challenge for the turkey industry. So I know that Dr. Chen had an episode of this podcast. It was about the histomoniasis, I think, and believe that it was episode of number 25. So in recent years, increasing the evidence has shown that Histomonas itself can transmit it directly between the birds, but traditionally it was believed that these protozoa required a vector for transmission between the birds, such as earthworm, dark beetling, and recent researches indicate that the birds can become infected orally through the exposure to the cecal content and through the cloacal drinking. Because of these transmission routes, prevention strategies like deworming for example, fenbendazole are not always effective when a flock is dealing with the blackhead disease. So my work has focused on the Histomonas melagidis co-infection and the use of feed additives to combat the disease. In the current study that we're going to discuss about, we evaluated lower inclusion levels of pine bark extract as a potential nutritional strategy to reduce the impact of histomoniasis.
What are the symptoms of histomoniasis or blackhead?
That's a great question. Actually, for the birds that we are working on, one of the most important symptoms are the lesions in ceca and lesions in the liver that we are always seeing in the birds. So usually you can take the samples from ceca or liver of the birds and take them to the laboratory and check them under the microscope and check the evidences that show the Histomonas melagidis cells are there or not.
You mentioned pine bark. What is it about pine bark that maybe has some potential as a treatment or a preventative?
Yeah, that's a pretty interesting story. So let me tell you a story about the Histomonas, about the pine bark and Histomonasis. Actually, I once got a call from a farmer who was raising nearly 300 turkeys in the backyard. He was concerned about the several dead birds and some weak birds. So that time I visited the farm, and we found out the birds had the histomonasis with the opening the birds and checking some of the livers and lesion scores in the ceca. So at that point, I just recommended the farmer you could identify the sick birds and quarantine them. Honestly, I felt quite clueless that time. But 2 weeks later, I returned to the farm, and I was surprising to find the healthy flock that time. So owner mentioned that when they slaughtered some of the birds, they noticed many small pieces of the pine bark in a crop of the birds. Actually, there was a fallen pine tree in the backyard of the house that previously was covered with the pine bark. When we checked that at the same day, most of the outer bark was gone. So that's exactly the time when we found this might be a natural way to the birds where they combating with the disease by instinct. From that point, we began to consider the pine bark as a candidate to our studies. After investigation more about the pine bark, we found that the pine bark has more phenolic compounds and antioxidant and antimicrobial properties. And some of the studies also reported they shown pine bark has some coccidial inhibition factors and gonna decrease and inhibit the Eimeria sporulation as well.
So it's not a specific compound in the pine bark, it's perhaps a combination of different compounds.
Yeah, whenever we are talking about the pine bark, it has mostly the tannins and polyphenolic compounds that we are talking about now. But we actually didn't do the analysis of the pine bark, but many studies they actually make include that all of the properties in a pine bark shows for inhibiting the protozoan disease are related to the polyphenolic compounds and the tannin content that they have.
So in your experiments, what is the source of pine bark? Is there a standardized commercial source, or are you obtaining it yourself?
Actually, there is no commercial pine bark product for poultry use nowadays. And the pine bark that we have used was the human grade, because in outside we have some of the human grade pine barks that are using for the human consumption. So I remember that the first day I received the pine bark product for my trial, I tested, and because it was human grade, I tested that one, and I was shocked by how bitter it was. It was too bitter that time, and I thought it would definitely reduce the feed intake of the birds, but in our studies, it had no negative effect of the pine bark on the feed intake.
Kemen calls all poultry experts. You already know the key to a profitable operation is healthy, productive birds. Our team of poultry experts are driven by curiosity to develop science-backed ingredients and solutions that help you maintain feed and water quality, improve intestinal health, optimize nutrition, and eliminate pathogens. Learn more today by diving in at kemen.com/poultry to learn more.
Is pine bark safe to use in poultry feed, or are there any drawbacks or limitations that producers should know about?
Definitely, there should be more studies on the pine bark, and they need to investigate more about the pine bark. But based on our study, I would say pine bark is a kind of natural product, and at low level, it can be safe, and it can be potential parasite for the combating the potential product that can combating the parasites, and definitely it's cheap. And but we need to definitely do more research about the pine bark and levels of the pine bark for the future, especially for keeping the birds for longer time until the slaughter time.
Where can our audience learn more about your work on pine bark and blackhead disease?
Yeah, this is a recent research. We have done it recently, and I'm going to have an oral presentation during the IPP. If they are interested about that one, they can come by, and I'm going to explain more about that. But if I want to highlight the key finding from this study, I would say that pine bark at the inclusion levels of 0.2 and 0.4% reduced the mortality by half, from 52% to almost 26% in Histomonas challenge bird. The optimal inclusion level appeared to be 0.2%, which was associated with the lower mortality and reduced the cecal lesion scores. And importantly, pine bark did not reduce body weight or feed intake either before or after the challenge.
Well, Hamid Naeini, thank you so much for joining us on the Poultry Nutrition Blackbelt Podcast.
Thank you.
That concludes another episode presented by Wisenetics. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform to stay updated on future episodes. I'm Doug Korver, and I'll see you next time on the Poultry Nutrition Blackbelt Podcast.